grew up through elementary, middle school, high school, and even our freshman year of college. We talked on the phone all the time. We were really close friends.
When I looked at his body language there, and also to his statements, as I shared with you off screen, is that I actually ran every statement that he made, even through Deceptio AI. So I was doing a double check to determine what was the percentage of that statement that was either truthful or not truthful based on statement analysis. So the question was, what was your relationship like with Nolan? And then he went on to describe, that Nolan, I can describe Nolan in a million ways. I mean, Nolan was not just a best friend to me, but he was a brother. So that was really powerful, how he actually internalized that relationship. That statement came up 91% truthful. Okay, so what does that mean? Sometimes they use contracture, sometimes they use odd language, but it doesn't fall into the deceptive category, so it's truthful.
I want to say, just so you know, this is not stuff that's admissible in a court of law, right, but it's interesting. So that was her baseline. Then we get into this controversy over Nolan's phone.
Exactly. A huge point of contention about this case is things that may have been deleted from Nolan's phone. So Officer Tatum asks him, did you touch Nolan's phone? Did you go through Nolan's phone? Did you delete anything?
And we play that for Susan, and she has an analysis.
Is there any chance or any knowledge that you have that anybody deleted stuff from his phone?
Absolutely not. I mean, like I said, there was no reason for us to get on Nolan's phone. No one touched Nolan's phone, but nothing. If none of us had touched Nolan's phone, then there's no reason for anything to be deleted. I mean, no one even was in contact with his phone until it was moved from the boat to the truck. And none of us have access to Nolan's password to get on his phone and delete anything. Absolutely not. And we have no reason to delete anything.
When we look at all of these different statements, most of them were truthful, but there's going to be one that I want to explore more. There is going to be question around the phone. I'm just going to let you know that. I believe that this is an area that needs a little bit more probing. It needs more. It's not a highly deceptive. It's just comes up as deception, as has been indicated in here. So the opposite hand below.
Nolan Wells, the question that won't go away. One of the most discussed and emotionally charged questions surrounding the disappearance and death of Nolan Wells is surprisingly simple. If Nolan knew how to swim, how did he end up dead in the water? For many following the case, this question has become the center of countless conversations. Family members, friends, online investigators, and members of the public continue to examine every known detail, hoping to understand whether Nolan's death resulted from a tragic accident or whether unanswered questions deserve further investigation. Knowing how to swim does not automatically guarantee survival in every situation. Strong swimmers can drown because of exhaustion, cold water, currents, injury, intoxication, panic, medical emergencies, or striking their head before entering the water. Investigators routinely consider all of these possibilities in water-related deaths. At the same time, people who have followed the case argue that Nolan's swimming ability makes them wonder whether something happened before he entered the water. They point to the sequence of events leading up to his disappearance and ask whether investigators have fully explained every gap in the timeline. These questions have fueled online discussions and independent analysis, although questions alone are not evidence that a crime occurred. The debate often centers on two competing possibilities. The first is that Nolan accidentally entered the water. Supporters of this explanation suggest that an unexpected fall, disorientation, fatigue, darkness, environmental conditions, or another unforeseen factor could have turned an ordinary situation into a fatal one within moments. History shows that even experienced swimmers have died under circumstances that initially seemed difficult to explain. The second possibility raised by some observers is that Nolan's entry into the water was connected to events that have not yet been fully understood. Those who hold this view believe and there are unanswered questions about the timeline, witness accounts, and other aspects of the case that they hope investigators will continue to examine. However, without verified evidence, these remain questions rather than established facts. Cases like this often become difficult because the public sees only part of the investigative file. Law enforcement may possess evidence that has never been released, while online communities analyze only the information available to them. This gap could create competing narratives, each attempting to explain the same mystery. For Nolan's family, the most important issue is not internet speculation, but obtaining clear, evidence-based answers. Every unexplained detail naturally becomes significant when a loved one dies unexpectedly. As discussions continue, one fact remains unchanged. Asking difficult questions is a normal part of public interest in an unresolved or controversial case, but conclusions should be based on evidence rather than assumptions. Whether Nolan's death resulted from a tragic accident or whether additional evidence may someday change the understanding of what happened is something that ultimately depends on the findings supported by investigators and verifiable facts. Until more evidence becomes available, the question that continues to resonate with many people is not an accusation, but a mystery. If Nolan Wells knew how to swim, what exactly happened that day? That is the question many hope will eventually receive a complete and evidence-supported answer. Why didn't Nolan's dad go to the crime scene and try to get clues? Nolan Wells, the boat, the timeline, and the questions investigators had to answer. As the investigation into Nolan Wells' disappearance continued, one of the biggest areas of public attention became the role of the people who were with him before he entered the water, especially the questions surrounding the boat and what happened during those final moments. Whenever a person disappears under unusual circumstances, investigators begin by reconstructing a timeline. Who was there? What was happening before the disappearance? What statements were given? What physical evidence can confirm or challenge those statements? For Nolan Wells' case, many people following the story focus on his friends because they were among the last people known to have been around him. Their actions, decisions, and accounts became a major part of the conversation surrounding the investigation. However, being among the last people to see someone alive does not automatically mean someone was involved in wrongdoing. In many investigations, friends and witnesses become key sources of information because they may hold the answers needed to understand what happened. The boat became one of the most discussed pieces of the story. People following the case questioned what happened on the boat, who was where, and whether the events leading up to Nolan entering the water matched the statements given afterward. Investigators typically examine details such as the condition of the boat, where people were located, phone data, physical evidence, witness statements, and whether the timeline makes sense. A major question raised by observers was, if Nolan knew how to swim, what circumstances caused him to end up in the water? That question led many people to examine the possibility of an accident. A person can fall unexpectedly, become injured, experience panic, or face conditions in the water that make survival difficult. Investigators must consider these possibilities before reaching conclusions. At the same time, some people questioned whether every detail surrounding the boat had been fully explained. They wanted to know if investigators found anything unusual, whether statements changed over time, and whether there were inconsistencies that required additional examination. In cases like this, detectives often look beyond individual statements and compare them with evidence. A timeline is built by matching witness accounts with technology, physical findings, and expert analysis. The detective's role is not to decide based on public opinion or online theories. The role of investigators is to determine what the evidence supports. If evidence confirms an accident, investigators follow that path. If evidence suggests something else happened, they continue investigating. The boat became a symbol of the unanswered questions surrounding Nolan's final moments. For some, it represented a possible explanation for a tragic accident. For others, it represented a place where they believed more questions needed to be answered. Ultimately, the most important part of any investigation is separating facts from assumptions. The people closest to Nolan may hold important information, but conclusions about their involvement must come from verified evidence, not speculation. The search for answers continues to center around the same questions. What exactly happened on the boat? What did witnesses see during those final moments? And what evidence can reveal the truth about how Nolan Wells ended up in the water? Those questions are why investigators carefully examine every detail, because in a case where a life was lost, the smallest piece of evidence can become the key to understanding what really happened. Nancy Grace has discussed the Nolan Wells case on her crime program, focusing on the unanswered questions surrounding the investigation, including the autopsy findings, the circumstances of his disappearance, and the conflicting information that has been publicly reported. One of the main points discussed was that the independent autopsy commissioned by Nolan's family listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined pending investigation. That does not mean investigators have determined a crime occurred. It means the available information was not enough for the pathologist to reach a final conclusion at that stage. During coverage of the case, Nancy Grace highlighted questions surrounding how Nolan ended up in the water and examined statements from people involved in the search. A major topic was the location where Nolan was found and the conditions around the shoreline. The United Cajun Navy's Todd Terrell discussed with Grace that the area had strong currents and sudden changes in water depth, which could be relevant when considering an accidental drowning scenario. Grace's reporting also focused on the fact that investigators still needed more information, including the official medical examiner's findings and other investigative evidence before a final explanation could be reached. Nancy Grace's investigation into Nolan Wells' death centered on one major question. What happened in those final moments before Nolan entered the water? With an independent autopsy calling the cause and manner of death undetermined, Grace examined whether the evidence supported a tragic accident, whether more answers were hidden in the timeline, and why investigators needed to carefully examine every detail before reaching conclusions. At this point, I want to go and search for what happened to Nolan. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Nolan Wells' new boat images raise more questions, but not final answers. The death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells has become one of the most closely watched investigations in Mississippi, not only because of the tragedy itself, but because nearly every new piece of evidence seems to generate additional questions rather than clear answers. Among the latest developments are photos and video that appear to show several of Nolan's friends aboard the boat that departed Horn Island on July 4th, while Nolan himself is not visible. At about the same time, public attention intensified around Katie McCormick, a young woman whom witnesses said Nolan had spoken with shortly before the boat left. As these details emerged online, many people described them as explosive or claimed that someone had been exposed. But separating verified facts from internet speculation is essential. According to public reporting, Katie McCormick was not part of Nolan's original boating group. Instead, she had traveled to Horn Island with a different group of friends. Her sister later stated that Katie believed Nolan intended to return to the mainland with the same friends who had brought him to the island. According to her account, Katie did not believe he had been left behind. Hindustan Times. That statement immediately created a conflict with another version of events. Some of Nolan's friends have said Nolan chose to remain on the island while they dealt with the boat emergency. Their account is that they urged him to get on the boat, but that he stayed behind voluntarily. Warren Hudson has publicly repeated that version in interviews. Say Hindustan Times. Katie's sister, however, described a different understanding of what happened. She said Katie assumed Nolan was preparing to board the same boat he had arrived on and believed his friends would not leave without him. That difference has become one of the central unanswered questions in the case. Hindustan Times. Newly released footage has also drawn widespread attention because it appears to show several people aboard the departing boat while Nolan is not seen in the available images. Those images have fueled further discussion online, but they do not by themselves establish what happened to Nolan after the boat departed or assign responsibility for his death. New York Post. Meanwhile, investigators have confirmed other important facts. GPS data obtained during the investigation tracked the boat's movements to and from Horn Island on July 4th. Authorities have said Nolan traveled to the island with friends, but was not on the boat when it left the island later that afternoon. The boat later returned to the mainland. CBS News. Nolan's family has continued to question how he ended up alone and why conflicting accounts have emerged about his final known moments. Attorney Ben Crump, representing the family, has publicly emphasized those inconsistencies, asking why different witnesses appear to remember the crucial moments differently. He has argued that investigators should continue examining every detail until those contradictions are resolved. Untelevised media. At the same time, authorities have not announced criminal charges related to Nolan's death, and no public findings have concluded that Katie McCormick or Nolan's friends committed a crime. The investigation remains active, and many questions have yet to be answered. As the case continues, the distinction between verified evidence and online speculation remains important. Public discussion has focused on the boat, the conflicting witness accounts, the GPS timeline, and the newly released footage. Those developments have increased public interest, but investigators, not social media, will ultimately determine what happened based on the evidence. For Nolan Wells' family, the central goal remains the same: obtaining a complete and accurate account of the events leading up to his disappearance and death. Nolan Wells' shocking discovery changed this whole case, and there is questions that remain. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. When search efforts intensified after Nolan Wells was reported missing, multiple agencies, including the United States Coast Guard and local authorities, participated in the search of the waters surrounding Horn Island. Search teams used boats, aircraft, and coordinated rescue resources to locate the missing teenager. Eventually, Nolan Wells was found in the Gulf waters near Horn Island. The discovery marked a heartbreaking end to what had begun as a search and rescue mission. His family, friends, and the community were left mourning, while investigators shifted their focus toward reconstructing the events leading up to his death. The discovery answered one question: where Nolan was found, but it did not answer many of the questions surrounding how he ended up in the water. As investigators interviewed witnesses, different accounts emerged regarding Nolan's final known moments on the island. Some of the young people present have said Nolan chose to remain behind while others departed because of problems involving the boat. Other public statements have suggested people believed Nolan was preparing to leave with another group. These differing accounts have fueled widespread public discussion. For investigators, inconsistent witness statements are not uncommon in complex cases. People's memories can differ because of stress, confusion, the passage of time, or simply because each witness observed different parts of an event. At the same time, investigators also examine whether inconsistencies may indicate that additional facts have yet to be uncovered. Because of those conflicting statements, Nolan's family has continued to seek a complete explanation of what happened during the final hours before his disappearance. The timeline remains one of the most important parts of the investigation. Investigators have reviewed boat movements, electronic records, witness interviews, photographs, videos, and other evidence to determine exactly who was where and when. Publicly released information has confirmed that Nolan was not aboard the departing boat, but many questions remain about how that decision came about and what occurred afterward. Those unanswered questions have led to intense public speculation online. Some observers believe the conflicting accounts warrant closer scrutiny, while others caution against drawing conclusions before investigators finish reviewing all available evidence. At this stage, however, there has been no official finding that anyone intentionally misled investigators or participated in a cover-up. Law enforcement has not announced criminal charges alleging such conduct. Even so, the inconsistencies remain significant because they are among the issues investigators must resolve before providing a complete account of Nolan's disappearance. For Nolan's family, every conflicting statement represents another unanswered question. They have repeatedly expressed that they want the evidence to speak for itself and hope investigators will continue following every lead until a clear timeline is established. As the investigation continues, the public is likely to remain focused on witness statements, physical evidence, and official findings rather than speculation. Ultimately, any determination about responsibility or wrongdoing will depend on the evidence gathered by investigators and any conclusions announced by the appropriate authorities. The only question that remains is who did this to Nolan? Why did some friends delete their social media? When a young person disappears under mysterious circumstances, every action taken by those closest to them is placed under a microscope. Families search for answers, investigators collect evidence, and the public often begins examining every available clue. In the case of Nolan Wells, one topic that has generated widespread online discussion is the claim that some of his friends deleted or deactivated their social media accounts after his disappearance. It is important to separate verified facts from speculation. Publicly deleting, deactivating, or making social media accounts private does not by itself prove wrongdoing. There are many reasons why someone may choose to leave social media during a highly publicized investigation, including harassment, threats, overwhelming attention, or advice from an attorney. At the same time, such actions often become the focus of public curiosity because they occur during an emotionally charged investigation. As news of Nolan Wells' disappearance spread, online communities began preserving screenshots, comparing timelines, and discussing changes they noticed on social media platforms. Some observers claimed that certain friends had removed photographs, deleted posts, changed usernames, or deactivated accounts altogether. Those observations fueled countless theories across social media, YouTube channels, and discussion forums. To many people watching from the outside, disappearing from social media seemed unusual. They asked why anyone would suddenly remove an online presence if they had nothing to hide. Others argued the opposite, that anyone facing thousands of accusations, hateful messages, and constant scrutiny might understandably choose to step away from public platforms. This contrast illustrates a larger issue that appears in many high-profile investigations. Public perception often fills the gaps where verified information is unavailable. Every deleted photograph becomes a potential clue. Every changed profile picture becomes a talking point. Every private account is interpreted through different lenses, depending on the viewer's assumptions. Digital investigators across the internet began creating timelines showing when accounts allegedly disappeared. Videos accumulated thousands of views as creators compared archived screenshots with current profiles. Some argued these changes represented panic. Others suggested they reflected fear of harassment rather than consciousness of guilt. Law enforcement, however, approaches digital evidence differently than the public. Investigators do not rely solely on whether a profile remains visible online. If necessary and legally authorized, they can seek records from social media companies, examine devices, review communications, and analyze digital activity. Simply deleting public posts does not necessarily erase information that investigators may already be able to obtain through appropriate legal processes. The intense attention surrounding Nolan's disappearance also placed enormous pressure on everyone connected to the case. Friends, classmates, and acquaintances reportedly became the subject of online speculation. In situations like this, people sometimes receive threatening messages, have personal information shared publicly, or experience relentless harassment. Those realities can motivate someone to deactivate an account regardless of whether they possess relevant information about the investigation. Another factor discussed online involves legal advice. Attorneys frequently recommend limiting or suspending social media activity during ongoing investigations. Even innocent comments can be misunderstood, taken out of context, or become part of public debate. Remaining silent online can therefore be a precaution rather than an admission of anything. The public's fascination with deleted social media reflects the modern reality that digital footprints often become central to investigations. Photos, location tags, messages, timestamps, and videos can all help establish timelines. Because of that, observers naturally focus on any changes they notice online. At the same time, there is a danger in drawing conclusions based solely on those changes. Social media does not always tell the complete story. Deleted content could have been removed months earlier, privacy settings may change automatically, or accounts might be disabled for reasons unrelated to an investigation. For Nolan Wells' family, the focus has consistently remained on obtaining clear, factual answers about what happened. Public attention has undoubtedly kept interest in the case alive. But speculation can also complicate investigations when rumors spread faster than verified information. The internet has changed the way missing person cases unfold. In previous decades, investigators controlled most information released to the public. Today, thousands of independent observers analyze videos, photographs, and social media activity in real time. While this collective effort sometimes uncovers useful leads, it can also amplify misunderstandings. Many online commentators have argued that if friends truly wanted to help, they should leave their accounts active and answer questions publicly. Others respond that investigations are conducted by law enforcement, not by internet commentators, and that witnesses may be instructed to avoid discussing the case publicly. These differing viewpoints have fueled continuing debate. Some see silence as suspicious, others see it as prudent. Without verified evidence explaining why any particular account was removed or made private, assigning a motive would be speculative. Another aspect frequently discussed is the preservation of digital evidence. Contrary to popular belief, deleting a public post does not necessarily eliminate its existence. Social media companies often retain records for varying periods, and investigators may be able to access information through lawful processes. In addition, screenshots, backups, cached pages, and messages shared with others can preserve content that no longer appears publicly. The Nolan Wells case has therefore become an example of how online behavior can shape public perception. Actions that may have ordinary explanations are sometimes interpreted as significant because they occur within the context of an unresolved investigation. Ultimately, whether friends deleted their social media out of fear, privacy concerns, legal advice, or other personal reasons is something that cannot be determined without reliable evidence. It is reasonable to observe publicly visible changes, but it is not reasonable to conclude that those changes alone establish involvement in a crime. As the investigation continues, the most meaningful developments will come from verified evidence, official investigative findings, witness statements that can be corroborated, and any forensic analysis released by authorities, not from assumptions based solely on changes to social media profiles. The unanswered questions surrounding Nolan Wells have understandably generated intense public interest. Yet maintaining a distinction between confirmed facts and speculation remains essential. Doing so helps protect the integrity of the investigation while ensuring that conclusions are based on evidence rather than online interpretation. The disappearance of a young person leaves families, friends, and entire communities searching for certainty. Social media can offer clues, preserve memories, and spark conversations, but it is only one small part of a much larger investigative picture. Until authorities establish the facts through evidence, claims about the significance of deleted social media accounts should be treated with caution rather than as proof of any particular conclusion. Nolan Wells' case, the role of witnesses and the search for the truth. In any major investigation, witnesses often become one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. They are the people who can provide investigators with a timeline, describe what happened before and after an incident.
Bait, Tyndall says, means investigators have an added obstacle while hearing from witnesses.
So we have to make sure that we have a good, solid investigation, and we also want to make sure that witnesses that we're going to, that we're getting their impressions of what happened, not just based on what they see or hear on social media. So I think it has a real detrimental effect when people start particularly putting out misinformation on public venues and on the internet. And
Tyndall says that with the circulation of misinformation, he encourages people to direct their eyes to what's happening locally.
If you're trying to find that information, talk to the people that were on Island that day.
Explain relationships between individuals and help authorities understand events that may not have been captured through physical evidence. In the case of Nolan Wells, witness accounts have played a major role as investigators attempt to reconstruct the events surrounding his disappearance and death. However, witness testimony is only one part of a much larger investigation, and every statement must be carefully examined alongside forensic evidence, digital records, photographs, videos, and other information before investigators can determine what happened. The investigation into Nolan Wells drew significant public attention because of the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. As investigators began looking into the events leading up to his death, they spoke with individuals who had been present during the trip and others who may have had information about Nolan's movements, interactions, and final hours. These interviews became a critical part of establishing a timeline and understanding the environment surrounding the tragedy. Witnesses in cases like this often face intense public attention because people want immediate answers. In the age of social media, interviews, rumors, and partial information can spread rapidly, causing certain individuals to become the focus of public discussion before investigators have completed their work. Law enforcement officials, however, must follow a process that relies on evidence rather than online theories. A person being interviewed does not automatically mean they are a suspect, and a person being mentioned publicly does not mean investigators have reached a conclusion about their involvement. One individual who received significant attention was Bart Edmiston Jr., described publicly as a former teammate and friend of Nolan Wells. According to statements from his attorney and family, Bart cooperated with the investigators, provided information, and denied any involvement in Nolan's death. His representatives have stated that he voluntarily participated in the investigation and that online accusations against him have caused serious personal consequences. No public authority has announced that Bart committed a crime or that any statement he provided was false. Understanding witness statements requires recognizing that memories can be complicated. Investigators know that people who experience stressful situations may remember events differently. Factors such as fear, confusion, distance from an event, lighting conditions, distractions, and the passage of time can all influence how someone remembers what happened. A difference between two accounts does not automatically prove that someone is being dishonest. Instead, investigators look for patterns and compare statements against evidence that can independently confirm or challenge what witnesses say.
Last time I saw Nolan, I was walking to the boat. This was before the fight. Nolan was walking towards Wyatt's boat. I was walking in the opposite direction towards my boat. And not even 10 minutes after that is when I got into a fight.
4 o'clock, altercation had happened between one of my other friends. So I went and checked on him for about 20 minutes, 20 to 15 minutes. I came back, Nolan's boat and the people that he was with were gone.
So the last time I personally laid eyes on Nolan was at like 3 o'clock. We left at 4:30. Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and my buddy yelled for Nolan, get it. get on the boat. We're leaving. She also mentioned that the last time she saw Nolan was when my buddy was yelling at him to get on the boat.
But the last time I saw Nolan.
In a case involving multiple people, investigators typically build a timeline by comparing each person's account. They examine questions such as, where was each person located? What time did certain events occur? Who communicated with whom? What actions happened before and after the incident? Were there photographs, videos, phone records, or other forms of documentation that support parts of the testimony? These questions help investigators separate confirmed facts from assumptions. Witnesses may also provide information that seems small but becomes important later. A conversation, a change in someone's behavior, a location detail, or an observation that initially appears insignificant can become meaningful when combined with other evidence. Investigators often collect large amounts of information before determining which details are important to the final explanation of events. The public discussion surrounding the Nolan Wells case also demonstrates the challenges of investigating cases in a digital era. Social media allows information to spread quickly, but it also creates the possibility of misinformation. Online communities often attempt to solve cases by analyzing interviews, photographs, and rumors. While public interest can sometimes bring forward helpful information, speculation can also unfairly affect people who have not been accused or charged with any crime. For families seeking answers, witness cooperation can be extremely important. Investigators rely on people coming forward with information, even if they believe certain details may not matter. A small piece of information from one witness may help confirm another person's account or provide investigators with a new direction. That is why law enforcement agencies often encourage anyone with relevant information, photographs, videos, or memories of an event to contact investigators. Based on the family's public statements, the issue was not simply that Nolan Wells' phone was eventually returned, it was how it was recovered and what they say they found on it afterward. According to Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, she said she used Life 360 to locate Nolan's phone after learning he was missing and saw that it was back on the mainland, not on Horn Island. She said a family friend went to retrieve the phone from the house of one of Nolan's friends and that there were issues getting it back. She recalled telling the friend's parent, "I'm Nolan's mom. We need his phone. We're trying to find him." After the phone was returned, she said she and her sister looked through it and found no photos or videos on either of Nolan's Snapchat accounts from that day, which she considered unusual because she said Nolan typically documented social events. She expressed concern that something may have been deleted. Attorney Ben Crump, representing the family, also publicly questioned why Nolan would have left his phone behind if he had voluntarily chosen to remain on the island, calling that scenario difficult to reconcile. At the same time, it's important to note that there has been no public finding by investigators that Nolan's friends deleted data from the phone or intentionally withheld it as part of a crime. Those concerns have been raised by the family and are part of the ongoing investigation, but they have not been established as fact. Wow, this is crazy. I want everyone to hit the like button and take a quick moment to leave your thoughts down in the comment section about what you feel happened. The questions surrounding witness statements. One of the biggest unanswered questions in the Nolan Wells investigation is why the accounts from some witnesses have become the focus of such intense public scrutiny. Since Nolan's disappearance on July 4th, 2026, investigators have interviewed numerous people who were on or near Horn Island that day. As details emerged, social media users began comparing witness statements, emergency call recordings, cell phone information, and public interviews, leading to widespread speculation about whether everyone had fully explained what they saw. However, as of this writing, investigators have not publicly accused Bart Edmiston Jr. or any other witness of concealing Nolan's death or committing a crime. People.com public attention intensified because Bart Edmiston Jr. was identified as someone who helped another boat that experienced mechanical problems near Horn Island. According to statements released through his attorney and family, he cooperated with investigators, voluntarily answered questions, and provided information that could assist the investigation. His family has strongly denied online claims that he witnessed Nolan's death or attempted to hide what happened, describing those allegations as false and announcing plans to pursue legal action against defamatory statements. People.com. At the same time, Nolan Wells' family has continued to ask difficult questions that remain unanswered. They have questioned the timeline of events, the handling of Nolan's cell phone, the disappearance of Snapchat content, and inconsistencies they believe deserve additional investigation. Their attorney has repeatedly called for a complete review of witness statements, digital evidence, and forensic findings before any final conclusions are reached. Those concerns reflect the family's search for answers, but they do not by themselves establish wrongdoing by any individual. The Guardian. The investigation remains active and law enforcement has continued to seek additional photos, videos, and eyewitness accounts from anyone who was present on Horn Island that day. Until the investigators release definitive findings or criminal charges are filed, the reasons for any differences in witness recollections remain uncertain. In major investigations, it is common for different witnesses to remember events differently, especially during fast-moving or stressful situations. Determining which accounts are accurate is ultimately the responsibility of investigators who compare interviews with physical evidence, digital records, and forensic results rather than relying on speculation. The death of Nolan Wells has generated widespread public attention, with many people closely examining the available evidence while investigators continue to work toward determining exactly what happened. As new witness accounts, recordings, and publicly discussed audio have surfaced, they have prompted additional questions about the timeline of the events on Horn Island. At this stage, however, many details remain unresolved, and investigators have not publicly concluded that any witness committed a crime or intentionally concealed evidence. Public reporting indicates that Nolan's family has questioned inconsistencies involving witness statements, cell phone data, and location information, while urging authorities to conduct a thorough investigation. Complex. One of the most discussed issues has been Nolan's cell phone. According to statements made publicly by his mother, she used the Life 360 application to locate his phone after realizing he was missing. She has said that the phone's reported location appeared to differ from Snapchat location information, creating confusion during the initial search. Those differences have become one of several topics investigators and the family's legal team have said deserve closer examination. Public reporting also states that the phone was eventually retrieved from a friend's residence after the family requested its return. The family has said they encountered difficulties recovering the phone, but investigators have not publicly concluded that those difficulties prove criminal intent or a cover-up. https://www.wtva.com. Questions have also circulated online about why the phone was returned later instead of immediately. At present, there is no publicly verified evidence establishing why the phone remained where it did or whether anyone deliberately withheld it. Several theories have been discussed publicly, but none have been confirmed by investigators. Because of that, it is important to distinguish unanswered questions from established facts. Returning the phone later may ultimately prove significant, or investigators may determine there was an innocent explanation. Until forensic analysis and witness interviews are complete, the reason remains unresolved. New York Post. Another issue receiving considerable attention involves the audio and video recorded during the trip. Various recordings have circulated publicly, leading to debate over whether they captured an argument and whether Nolan's voice was present. Some witnesses have disputed interpretations of the recordings, while others have suggested the audio deserves additional forensic review. Public reports indicate investigators continue evaluating available recordings alongside witness statements, rather than relying on internet speculation. Today, news. The family's attorneys have repeatedly emphasized that the phone itself may contain valuable evidence. Public reports state they sought preservation and inspection of data from the device and later pursued records from social media platforms and Life 360 so experts could determine whether information had been deleted or whether important digital evidence remained available. Those requests reflect investigative steps rather than proof that data was actually removed by any specific individual. New York Post. Life 360 has become one of the most closely examined pieces of digital evidence because Nolan's mother has publicly stated that the application's location history appeared inconsistent with other location information available that evening. That discrepancy has fueled questions from the family and commentators, but it has not yet resulted in an official explanation. Digital location services can occasionally differ because they rely on different technologies, update intervals, and available signals, so investigators typically compare multiple sources before reaching conclusions. Whether those differences have investigative significance remains under review. Complex. Public reporting also indicates the family found Nolan's Snapchat accounts unusually empty after recovering the phone. His mother has said that was inconsistent with his normal habit of documenting outings through photos and videos. Because of those concerns, attorneys representing the family have requested records from Snapchat and other technology companies to determine whether recoverable information exists. As of now, no public finding has concluded who, if anyone, deleted content or whether any deletion occurred after Nolan's disappearance. BIN, Black Information Network. As the investigation continues, law enforcement has repeatedly encouraged anyone with factual information to come forward, stressing that even seemingly minor details could prove valuable. That reflects the broader reality of complex investigations. Witness interviews, digital evidence, forensic examinations, and timeline reconstruction often take weeks or months before authorities are prepared to draw reliable conclusions. Until those processes are complete, many of the questions surrounding Nolan Wells' death remain unanswered. She emphasized that determining what is genuinely present on a recording requires strict forensic procedures and specialized equipment. People.com. Owen also warned about confirmation bias. If listeners are told beforehand what they are supposed to hear, many will genuinely hear those words whether or not they exist. This is one reason forensic experts avoid providing suggested transcripts before conducting independent analysis. People.com. Despite these warnings, public interest continued to grow. Numerous podcasts, YouTube creators, television commentators, and independent investigators dissected the recording frame by frame. Some argued it represented a breakthrough in the investigation. Others believed it was being misinterpreted entirely. iHeart. Nolan's family has continued searching for answers. Their legal team announced that experts would independently evaluate the CETO recording alongside other available evidence. They have maintained that every possible lead deserves careful examination while avoiding unsupported conclusions. People.com. Meanwhile, investigators have not publicly stated that the recording proves foul play or identifies anyone responsible for Nolan's death. At the time of reporting, official investigators continued reviewing all available evidence while awaiting additional forensic analysis. Preliminary public information has not established a definitive cause or manner of death. People.com. As national attention increased, the investigation took an unexpected turn. Authorities announced arrests involving individuals accused of threatening witnesses, Nolan's friends, family members, and even a judge connected to someone involved in the investigation. These threats highlighted how emotionally charged the case had become and demonstrated the real-world consequences of widespread online speculation. People.com. One of the most important lessons from the CETO recording is the difference between public speculation and courtroom evidence. Investigators cannot rely solely upon what internet users believe they hear. Instead, they must establish authenticity, maintain chain of custody, verify the original recording, conduct repeatable forensic analysis, and determine whether any identifiable statements can be supported scientifically. Forensic audio examination often includes spectral analysis, frequency isolation, waveform comparison, noise reduction, synchronization with original recordings, and peer review by independent experts. Even then, experts sometimes conclude that certain words remain unintelligible rather than guessing at their meaning. This cautious approach is essential because criminal investigations require evidence that can withstand legal scrutiny. The Nolan Wells investigation remains active. While the CETO recording has become one of the most discussed aspects of the case, it represents only one piece of a much larger investigative puzzle that includes witness statements, forensic examinations, digital evidence, timelines, search efforts, and medical findings. Whether the recording ultimately provides investigators with meaningful new information remains unknown. It may eventually answer critical questions, or it may simply illustrate how easily ambiguous evidence can divide public opinion. What is already clear is that the recording has become symbolic of the search for truth. Every second of background audio has been analyzed by professionals and amateurs alike. Families continue seeking answers. Investigators continue examining evidence. Experts continue urging patience until official forensic conclusions are complete. Until those findings are released, the CETO recording should be viewed carefully. It has generated important questions, but many claims circulating online remain unverified. Distinguishing between confirmed facts, expert analysis, and internet speculation will remain essential as the investigation moves forward.